Okay, so you're getting ready for a coding interview.
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure out which language
Right.
to use.
Out of the hundreds.
Yeah. To really make your skills shine.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even choose?
Right.
Well, that's what we're diving into today. We're looking at this article called Best Programming Language for Your Coding Interview.
Yeah.
And it is a tricky question, right? Like,
it is a very common question.
Yeah.
And I think the article does a good job at sort of highlighting how there isn't like a magic bullet answer.
Right.
Yeah.
There isn't one best language.
Exactly.
It's more nuanced than that.
It is.
It really is. And one thing that really jumped out at me was that it's almost like picking out an outfit.
Oh.
You want something that's comfortable,
Yeah.
but also makes you look good, right? Like, it's got to be presentable.
Right.
And so you know this balance between comfort and, like, really showing off your skills.
Yeah.
And the article really seems to come down on the side of comfort being the most important. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, you know, when you're in that interview,
it's high pressure.
It's very high pressure.
Yeah.
And being able to think clearly and solve the problem efficiently.
Right.
Is the most important thing.
It's not about showing off.
Exactly.
It's about getting the job done.
It's not about remembering that, like, super obscure syntax that you never use.
Oh, totally. Because you know what happens.
Yeah.
You blank.
You totally blank.
Yeah.
It's like when someone asks you,
like someone's name.
What's my name again?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, I just met you 30 seconds ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what it's like if you don't know the language.
Yeah.
Like the back of your hand.
It's like trying to tell a story.
Yeah.
In a language that you're not fluent in.
Right.
It's just, you're not going to sound as eloquent.
Exactly. And I've literally seen it happen.
Oh, I'm sure.
Where someone's like super smart.
Right.
But they get in there and they just can't remember.
Yeah. How to do something simple in the language, and it just throws them completely off.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Choose the language you're most comfortable with.
Right.
But then that brings up the Python question.
Oh.
Because Python is like
it's like the Swiss Army knife. It can do everything.
It can do everything. It's so popular. It's readable. It's great for solutions.
Right.
But is it too high level for an interview?
Yeah.
Like, is that going to hurt you?
Right. That's the real dilemma.
Yeah.
Because some interviewers might see that as you're relying too heavily on Python's like built-in functions.
Right. The shortcuts.
The shortcuts. Yeah. And that you maybe don't understand what's going on underneath the hood.
Right. So how do you address that if you're a Python person?
Right.
How do you show them you're not just a code monkey?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's really about being able to speak intelligently.
Okay.
About your use of those tools.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're using a built-in Python function to sort a list, can you also explain how that sorting algorithm is actually implemented?
So you got to know what's happening.
Yeah, show that you understand the underlying concept.
Under the hood, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not enough to just know the language.
Right.
You got to know how it works.
You have to understand those fundamental computer science concepts.
Okay, interesting. So, like, even if Python is your go-to, it's good to be ready to dive a little deeper.
Exactly.
Especially when it comes to things like time complexity.
Yes, absolutely.
So when we talk about time complexity, what are we even talking about?
So time complexity is essentially how efficient your code is.
Okay.
And it's a measure of how the runtime of your code increases as the size of your input data grows.
Okay.
So if you have a small input, your code might run really quickly.
Right.
But as that input size grows, does your code slow down exponentially?
Oh, I see.
Or does it maintain a relatively consistent speed?
Okay.
And that's what interviewers are looking for, is that you're not just focused on getting the right answer.
Right.
But that you're thinking about how efficient your code is.
You're thinking about scale.
It's that.
So it's like choosing between taking the scenic route versus just getting on the highway.
I like that.
Right. They both get you there.
Yeah.
But one is going to be a lot faster.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're trying to get there in a hurry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And it's not just about getting there faster, is it? It's about knowing which route to take.
Exactly.
And understanding why that efficiency matters, especially as the amount of data you're dealing with grows.
Okay. So it's not enough to just know the language.
Right.
You need to understand these underlying concepts like time complexity and what else did this article talk about that's important for really nailing a coding interview?
Well, they stressed having a good grasp of the fundamentals, right? Regardless of what language you choose.
Okay.
It's like having a well-stocked toolbox, you know?
Okay. I like that.
You need to be comfortable with the tools of the trade.
So what kind of tools are we talking about here?
So we're talking about things like really mastering the syntax of your chosen language.
Okay.
Knowing those essential libraries like the back of your hand.
Right.
And of course, that understanding of time complexity that we just talked about.
Right. You got to know how to use a hammer if you're going to build a house.
Exactly. You wouldn't show up to a construction site and not know how to measure a 2x4.
Exactly. Or like what a 2x4 even is.
Exactly. And just like a carpenter studies different types of wood, a good programmer, they understand the nuances of their language, the strengths, the weaknesses.
Okay, so you gotta know your tools.
You gotta know your tools.
You gotta know the materials.
Yes.
Now, the article did mention some cases where it might make sense to step outside of your comfort zone language for interview.
Yeah, like if you're really into some obscure language that nobody's ever heard of.
Like, what was that example they used? Brainfuck?
Yeah, brainfuck. I mean, who codes in brainfuck?
Unless that's the job you're applying for.
Right, exactly. If you're applying to be the brainfuck developer, then by all means, go for it.
Show off those skills. But I guess the point is, if your go-to language is super niche, it might be worth at least brushing up on something a little more mainstream for the interview.
Yeah, know your audience, right.
Right. Speak the language of the company, so to speak.
Exactly.
But what if you're comfortable with Python?
Yeah.
But the job requires some Java.
Right, and that's where adaptability comes in.
Okay.
And the article emphasizes that if the role requires a specific language, it's always a good idea to be upfront about your experience level.
Okay.
And to be eager to learn.
Show that you're willing to grow.
Exactly.
Because nobody expects you to know everything.
Nobody knows everything.
Right.
Especially in the ever-changing world of programming.
It changes so fast.
Yeah.
Speaking of learning, though, I really liked how practical this article was about how to prep, like regardless of what language you choose.
Right.
What were some of the tips that they gave?
Well, I mean, it all comes down to practice.
Of course.
Right. Practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, you're not going to walk into a piano recital having never played the piano.
Exactly. So they suggest regularly solving coding problems in your chosen language.
Okay.
Reviewing those language fundamentals and really getting your hands dirty. Implementing common data structures and algorithms from scratch.
Oh, from scratch. That's hardcore.
Yeah, and, not relying on those crutches that we have in our day-to-day coding lives.
Right, like our fancy IDEs and...
Exactly, like autocomplete.
Autocomplete, yeah, because guess what?
You're not going to have autocomplete on a whiteboard.
No, you're not. And that's terrifying.
It is a little terrifying, but, it's a good way to prepare.
It's like training for a marathon.
Exactly.
You gotta put in the miles.
You gotta put in the miles.
Even when you don't want to.
Even when you don't want to.
And then when you get there, you're ready.
You're ready to go. Exactly.
And they also mentioned, I think, mock interviews.
Yes, mock interviews are so crucial.
Because it's one thing to be able to code by yourself at your computer.
Right.
But it's another thing entirely.
Yeah, to explain your thought process.
To articulate what you're doing.
Exactly.
To another human being.
Another human being in real time. Yeah.
Who's judging you.
Right, who might be judging you, yeah.
Well, hopefully not judging, but...
Hopefully they're impressed.
Yeah, assessing you.
Yeah, there you go, assessing.
It's true, though, having someone to, talk it through with can really help you solidify those concepts in your own mind.
100%.
Because sometimes you don't even realize what you don't know until you try to explain it to somebody else.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, hey, I think this has been a super helpful deep dive.
Yeah, I agree.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
When it comes to choosing the best programming language for coding interviews.
For sure. And I think, if listeners take away one thing from today, it should be that.
What's the one thing?
It's not just about memorizing syntax.
Okay.
It's really about showcasing your ability to solve problems.
Show your work, as they say in math class.
Exactly. Show your work. Demonstrate that thought process. And I think choosing the right language plays a huge role in that.
Yeah, because if you're comfortable,
you
can really let your skills shine through.
Exactly.
And you can focus on the problem.
Yes.
Not the syntax.
Not the syntax.
Awesome. Well, for everyone listening, good luck on those coding interviews. Choose wisely, practice hard, and go wow them.
You got this.
And we'll catch you in the next deep dive.
See you next time.